This is the DP Show,
where insanity sounds sane.
And now, the man, the myth, the legend in his own mind, D. Palmer.
It's the DP Show. I'm DS Palmer, getting you ready for another Diamondback broadcast. The D-backs 7-3 on their most recent homestand, doing just enough to keep the Giants and the Dodgers within arm's reach. And right now, they got a chance to really make a big chip into that as they're in Los Angeles, getting ready to start 3 games against the Dodgers. LA 4 games ahead of the Diamondbacks in the loss column, and 5 games back are the Diamondbacks trailing the Giants, as those two teams are perched atop the National League West after the Dodgers swept San Francisco. We'll talk more about that in just a bit. There's another big athletic event going on right now, and it's one that has been popular despite my best efforts to try to make it otherwise. And I've been trying hard for the last, since 1992, I guess, maybe 96, to understand what people see in this whole Olympic thing. And I'm going to talk to you about exactly why I think this is bananas, why I think it is against the general outlinings of what it is to be a conservative, to be so wrapped up in this nonsense. And furthermore, why this is just generally boring anyway. That's what I'll just come right out of the closet here. I work in sports. I cover a women's basketball team. And people ask me, and they find that out, oh my gosh, you must surely love the Olympics. And I say to them, oh my gosh, I most certainly don't. Because those of us who spend time getting paid to cover non-revenue sports don't really want to spend time watching non-revenue sports for free. That's just kind of the rule of the trade there. And in fact, the Olympics are nothing but a 2-week extravaganza of non-revenue sports. They're called non-revenue sports in college because these sports generate almost no interest. But for some reason, every 4 years, people convince themselves that this stuff is actually fascinating. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is during the Olympics that we have decided that these things are in fact fascinating, why it is a form of entertainment to watch somebody run in a straight line, to watch somebody swim in a straight line, to watch very little girls flip around on a very narrow, though very straight line. What it is about that we find so fascinating, though only every 4 years, and this is the point that I've been trying to make with those that are close to me, is if this is interesting now, why isn't it interesting besides this 4-year period? Where every 4 years we convince ourselves that gymnastics are fun to watch, that ice skating is fun to watch. It's just not the case. If it was interesting now, it would be interesting 2 years from now, when it doesn't matter. Bottom line. But I'm willing to admit that I might be the only one who believes this, even though I think I might be the only one thinking rationally at this point, and certainly the TV ratings are staring me in the face and disagreeing about this. But as far as a conservative goes, I think that a lot of this has to go with how this is going to really provide people with an opportunity to demonstrate how proud they are, how nationalistic they can be when we gather around our televisions to support our guys. It's much like supporting the troops, so to speak, except instead of supporting military men, we're right now supporting swimmers. Next week we'll be supporting track guys. It is a way to demonstrate how much our country means to us. Back in the days of empire in the 19th century, we called this sort of thing jingoism. Right? We don't necessarily go out and make empires anymore officially, but what we do is go out and win all sorts of athletic competitions. If these were just people that were from your neighborhood, I don't know if you would necessarily have the same sort of pride. Or just ask yourself this: when was the last time you really got all hopped up because your local high school won the state track and field championship? Did you even know that if that had ever happened? I'll wait. Go ahead and try to think back. But it's a big deal when the Olympics happen, and I think it's only because we get to identify ourselves nationally with an unusual amount of success. Although the Chinese are making that interesting at this point, especially as far as the swimming goes. The Americans typically do so well because, just as it is with everything in the United States, our continent involves such a wide variety of different participants and athletes and so forth that we can do pretty well with the whole swimming thing. And the Chinese would hang around while the swimming happens, but they don't have the track stars that we have because of the many different types of personalities and people that live here. It's much the same way as far as anything goes industrially, geologically. the United States is blessed in that sort of way. So we get to, for 2 weeks, take great joy in watching ourselves do so many things so great. And it's jingoism. Just like the British in the 19th century got to think of themselves as being special and unique because of the great empire that they had, so do the Americans, even though it means very little to us individually that this is happening at this scope. It is something that everybody gets to take pride in, whether or not it is irrationally. But this really got me thinking, especially about the modern history of these modern games. And I think that you might find a little bit of this interesting, especially if you are hopped up on Olympic fever. Pierre de Coubertin, a Frenchman in the latter part of the 19th century, after watching the Germans steamroll the French in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, started trying to figure out exactly what it is that made the Germans, the British, the Americans so much more inclined toward great militarism. And what he came to find out was that the French soldiers had a lack of vigor. A lack of vigor. And then I'm going to read to you. After examining the education of the German, British, and American children, Coubertin decided that it was exercise, more specifically sports, that made a well-rounded and vigorous person. So what he did was to try and get France a little bit more involved internationally in athletics. And in 1890, he organized and founded a sports organization that was going to play a role in trying to revive the Olympic Games. At a meeting of this organization in 1892, he stated, "Let us export our oarsmen, our runners, our fencers into other lands. That is the true free trade of the future. And the day it is introduced into Europe, the cause of peace will have received a new and strong ally. It inspires me to touch upon another step I now propose, and in it I shall ask that the help you give me hitherto will extend again, so that together we may attempt to realize upon a basis suitable to the conditions of our modern life the splendid and beneficent task of reviving the Olympic Games." The two things that he mentions that we should most consider as the 2012 Olympic Games go on are the only two really real benefits that he mentions internationally that staging these Olympic Games would bring. In no particular order, the cause of peace will have received a new and strong ally via sports. The cause of peace will have received a new and strong ally. Is that what's going on over there in London, England right now? Well, we'll talk about that shortly. But also, the new free trade of the future, exporting our oarsmen, our runners, our fencers into other lands. Now, he might just be saying that exporting stuff into other lands is the new free trade of the future. Question again, is that what is going on right now in merry old England? Is it? Free trade, is that what is being celebrated right now with these Olympic Games? And I think that is usually what everybody cites as what makes these things so special, especially during the Cold War. Sure, you got people who don't like each other. Americans don't like communists, and so on and so forth down all the more obscure lines of different nationalities that have been at each other's throats over the years. But you can set aside those things and run in a straight line, and people will find it generally entertaining. And it's going to show the cause of humanity rising above and all that stuff. Otherwise, you know, everybody also sets aside their differences to try to find a way to make a buck and exploit the consumer as they flock to their televisions and get told what they should and should not be buying. All right, free trade. Now, I'm all for that. If people want to flock to their TVs and, get commercialized, I think that's great. I think that is wonderful if it is, in fact, a free trade that is being allowed and processed. And John W. Whitehead over the weekend published something that I found at LouRockwell.com. It was titled London 2012 Olympics, the staging ground for the coming police state. Let that sink in. The staging ground for the coming police state. Because what you're finding, if you're really looking for it, is that these modern Olympic Games aren't doing anything to try to propagate those two benefits that the original modern Olympiad was supposed to bring forth, especially peace and free trade. In fact, you're finding the exact opposite. And the question that I have as we go through this is why are we still doing these things in these economic times and circumstances? If this is what is required, okay, well, maybe Whitehead has an answer for that before we get into it, meaning before we get into the absence of peace and free trade. Check it out. He wrote, "It's what the Romans used to refer to as bread and circuses. The idea that the key to controlling the masses is by satiating their carnal appetites and entertaining them with mindless distraction." Mindless distraction. Go back to the YouTube page and look up my review of Batman if you want to know what else can be considered a mindless distraction. Thus, while the world loses itself in the pomp and circumstance of a thoroughly British Olympics, complete with Sir Paul McCartney rocking the opening ceremony, celebrity sightings galore, and a fair share of athletic feats and inspirational victories to keep us glued to the TV sets, a more sinister drama will be unfolding. He's going to go on to describe some of that, but I got a couple questions. First of all, another way to say this, everybody's hopped up on their jingoism. Everybody's so caught up in how great it is and how this is just the most recent example of American might and dominance and so forth. And nobody for 2 weeks is really going to be spending a lot of time thinking about, among other things, how the U.S. economy needs 300,000 jobs every month to try to keep pace with population growth. And we're not coming anywhere near that. And we haven't been coming anywhere near that ever since, or for years now. Okay? The Olympics are great in the sense that for more than 2 weeks, really, because everybody's got the anticipation and the hangover before and afterward, respectively, that nobody's really thinking about how ugly the economy is right now. Right? So there's some bread and circuses for you. For example. Furthermore, everybody is forgetting about the diplomatic and martial issues that the U.S. is facing. 2 failed wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. A third one now starting to emerge in Syria. Nobody's ever really talking about this because they are so wrapped up in the Olympics. Now, that just begs the question again, the first thing that I asked. If these Olympic Games are so great, why don't we watch any track and field and swimming and gymnastics and all that stuff between the different Olympic Games? I'm telling you that these things are not about sport at all. In fact, if you went back and looked at how these things are differently packaged, these are produced for women. Okay, this isn't about athletics. This isn't about the athletes. This certainly isn't about the different competitions. This is all about backstory. And the reason that NBC has been able to take these things and turn them into this cash cow is because they have reporters. Most recently, I've been just horrified to find out that one of them is Ryan Seacrest. Just to give you an idea about the journalistic integrity behind the Olympics, they're using Ryan Seacrest to give you these heart-wrenching backstories, almost all of which involve some sort of parent or mentor or guardian who has overcome some sort of physical deficiency. And despite that, despite living next to somebody who is somehow crippled, this Olympian rose up and realized his full athletic potential. Oh my gosh, isn't it just amazing? That is what people are tuning into. This is just a soap opera. This is just reality TV. In fact, this was probably the first reality programming. Right? You guys think you have it bad. Well, so did this guy, and he overcame. This girl overcame her mother's clubfoot and found out that she still loves to run. Oh my gosh, it's inspirational. It's not inspirational. It's just bad theater. Okay? This is a poor narrative device. This is just like potentially killing Batman. It's sloppy. It's lazy. All right? If people really wanted to watch the Olympics, just show us the people running in the straight lines, for crying out loud. The backstories are not interesting to real fans of athletics. They are interesting to people who want to watch soap operas, and that is who wants to watch the Olympics. Every 4 years, what winds up happening, it isn't necessarily that sports fans want to watch the Olympics. Women want to watch the Olympics because they get to get all that fancy pants backstory business. Boring. It's boring. It's boring to people who really want to watch sports. Because they're really not showing sports. I refuse to engage the Olympics as an actual conversation about it being a sporting event. But what we're finding out now in this modern age, especially the age of terror, what we're having now is the Olympics providing a pretty neat dry run for anything that may have to come down the chute in the future. And when we come back on the other end of this, going to take a look at exactly what is going on that we should be aware of at these 2012 Olympic Games. Also, why this is a giant fraud anyway. The Olympics are an athletic fraud perpetrated on the saps that are watching it for the backstories without realizing that this is just a bunch of Barry Bonds. And if you need any example, just go read Game of Shadows. This is the DP show. I'm getting you ready for the BP show. More on the Olympics coming up on the other end of this on iTalk 106.7.